Second, let me go live also on YouTube. So we're streaming on YouTube as well. Okay, so hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. It's wonderful to see you all here. My name is Maya. I'm part of the 57 Hours team, and I'm in charge of delivering great webinars such as this one today. So if this is your first time hearing of us, we're an online platform that connects people with certified guides for outdoor adventures. So today we are presenting yet another one of our big adventure webinars with our well-known webinar host, Rob Coppolillo. Rob also mentioned this during his presentation. This webinar is not a replacement for AVI courses. This is more an informative session on what you need to do before heading to the backcountry. So during the presentation, please use the chat, connect with one another, and we'll also have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar where you can ask anything you want to know about backcountry skiing, and Rob will answer them right after the presentation. So please ask your questions. You can use the Q&A section of Zoom. You will see at the bottom of your screen a little icon. So just leave your questions there and we will collect them to answer after the presentation. So let's get started with the reason why we're all here, which is to talk about backcountry skiing. I'll let Rob tell you a little bit more about himself, but our host for the hour has a wealth of knowledge to share. We're really lucky that he's joining us again here today. So without further ado, Rob, the stage is yours. Take us to this amazing world of backcountry skiing.
Cool. Thanks, Maya. Thank you, Maya. And I just saw a buddy of mine posted in the comments, George Jackson, who we skied together at Sunrise Lodge a couple of years ago with another friend, Tom Wolf. I just saw Tom down in Las Vegas climbing. The campground in Vegas is full of climbers and skiers from Canada right now waiting for the snow to pile up. And so anyway, I just saw Tom, but we had a great week at Sunrise Lodge a couple of years ago. It was so cold, but we had great skiing. It was really nice. And then someone from Lebanon just signed up. That might be a totally, that's a first time. Some gentleman named, I think, Gilbert or Gilbert, however we say, Gilbert, if you speak in French. But cool, great. I'm going to shut my chat window now because if I try to read the chat while I'm looking at slides, everything goes crazy and then Maya has to bail me out. So anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks everybody for signing up. And my internet is mostly good. If it starts wobbling or something, we may have to hotspot on my phone here. I'm on a little island out in front of Seattle and it usually has good internet, but we'll see. And so we'll get going here. So thanks everybody for checking out our webinar on backcountry skiing, sort of an orientation and a little chat about some safety stuff for first timers who are getting out touring. There's probably a range of you here and we'll boom, get going. So backcountry skiing, right? Sounds awesome. The gear is cool. Everybody's doing it, right? So maybe you went out and bought some new gear this summer or last year and now you got to figure out what to do with it. So now what? We'll talk a little bit about gear, a little bit about safety, and then we can have some time at the end for questions too. So by all means, throw your questions in the chat and Maya will keep track of some of them and we'll have a few minutes at the end. So Maya gave me a nice introduction right there. That's my little company, Veta Mountain Guides, and I started it in Colorado with a buddy and he has since moved to Italy and married an Italian woman. I was living in Chamonix and now we've moved back to Seattle. So that's my little company. I'm a full mountain guide and internationally licensed. I was in the first 100 Americans to do that. And I think we're up to about 150 now. So we're chipping away at it. France, I think last I saw, I think France had 1,800 active mountain guides right now. So we're not quite catching up to France and Italy and Germany, Austria yet, but we're working on it. So I also have a little side business as a journalist. You can see a couple of my books on the lower right there. The Mountain Guide Manual came out in 2017 and the Ski Guide Manual came out a year ago. And so I haven't gotten my first royalty check from the Ski Guide Manual yet. So we're fingers crossed. We'll see if I'm a thousandaire by Christmas here. And that little upper right photo, that's me in Chamonix a couple years ago. We moved over there just before COVID and sort of rode out COVID in France. And that was a good time, but it was definitely a weird time to be there away from the States. And then that's my family on the left, my wife, Rebecca, and our twin boys, Luca on the left and Dominic on the right. And they're at school today doing their thing. So that's kind of my background. I grew up mostly in Colorado and have skied all over the place now, Norway, Svalbard, all over Europe, a little bit in Alaska, a bunch in Canada. And then I guide the rest of the year too, doing rock climbing, ice climbing, all that kind of stuff. So between all that, I get around and get to see a lot of people and connect with folks. So it's cool. And we'll just give you a little, this is a trip from a couple years ago. This is not the one George and I were on, but this is further north at a place called Burney Glacier Chalet. Tom is going back there this year with a gang. This is an amazing spot. And this was a wonderful day. And we were on top of a peak called Loft Peak, and we got to ski on track snow 5,000 feet to the valley bottom, like 1,300 meters. It was really, really cool. Maybe even more, 14, 15, geez. My metric is already going. I'm back in the States, but you'll see my brother is way down there on the glacier skiing, and I'm chatting a little bit too much, but you'll see. No map left, but oh, sorry. Next. Oh yeah, sublime. Next. There you go. That was a good ski day right there. So that's called Loft Peak. That was a fun one. Hang on, there we go. So anyway, Maya mentioned this in the intro that this is not an avalanche course. So I just want to make sure that all of you get into an avalanche course if you're going to be backcountry skiing and a companion rescue course. And we'll chat a little bit about it, but this is not going to take the place of an Abbey course. And we'll talk about some resources and how you find one. You can certainly connect with one on 57 Hours. You can email me, ask around, friends. If you're in a place like Salt Lake or Victor, Idaho, or anywhere in Western Canada, really, you're probably fairly close to an avalanche course, so we can keep talking about it. But all right, there we go. So we'll talk a little bit first about touring gear. So some of the gear is going to look a little bit different than you're used to if you're an Alpine skier. If you have questions specifically about split boarding, I am not a split boarder, but we can chat a little bit about it. I sort of am familiar with how that gear works, but I got to say, I snowboarded once in about 1987 when the first Burton board came out, and I nearly killed myself. So I just stuck with the skis. But we'll talk a little bit about the gear and what you do with it. If you've got some questions about specific stuff, let me know, skins, or you've got a particularly idiosyncratic binding or something, let me know. We can try to address that in the comments. And then if we don't have an answer for you, certainly I can do a little research and we can correspond via email. Then we'll talk a bit about where and when to go, how you figure that out, who you're skiing with, your team. And then of course, I'll hammer you on avalanche education again at the end. And then hopefully we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end, right? So we'll start with skis, boots, and skins, and then graduate to some safety equipment, beacon, shovel, probe, and then we'll talk about how you're going to carry that stuff around in your backpack. And every year it seems like there's more and better gear on the market. So every year somebody shows up at a course or a hut trip with a ski or a binding or whatever that I haven't seen yet. So, but for the most part, the gear has really caught up, and it's all pretty reliable and great to use. And so, whatever you have typically works pretty darn well. So, all right, we'll start with skis. That's my buddy Paul right there, looking pretty psyched. It was a soft, snowy day, so we were going to have a good skiing. And he is holding a popular backcountry ski right there. This one's made, it's branded by La Sportiva. It's made by another company, but you can see the shovel of this ski, the upturned part in the front really looks pronounced, right? Compared to a traditional Alpine ski that I grew up skiing on in the 70s. But you can see we call that an early rise tip, meaning it's just a little surfy. It comes up off the snow, and it really helps a backcountry ski surf around and blast through variable snow or stay floating in really soft snow, something like that. This was a trip up in Canada, south of Nelson, British Columbia. So luckily the snow is pretty soft and nice, and ski like that is really much more forgiving, and it's somewhat floaty. We say it keeps you up on top of the snow, so it's kind of nice. And that's often the main difference with a backcountry ski compared to an alpine ski, is this construction and shape. And so they'll shape the ski to have a little bit of early rise in the front, sometimes in the tail even, and that really helps the ski release and turn more easily. And that's the main difference. We often ski a wider ski in the backcountry as well. That ski right there, I think, is 108 millimeters underfoot. And, you know, an alpine ski might be 75 millimeters underfoot, the ones you see people ripping around the ski resort on. So, you know, a little bit of early rise, a slightly wider ski, and then obviously the weight. We're going to lug these things uphill strapped to our feet unless you're helicopter skiing. And so typically backcountry gear is going to be lighter almost across the board. Skis are no different. So often an alpine ski will have metal in it or titanol, and a heavier wood in the core, like a poplar. And backcountry skis, they'll switch to a lighter wood like a paulownia, and maybe take the metal out of the ski. So a light backcountry ski might be 12 or 1300 grams, up to more than about 2000 grams of ski. You're going to start to suffer a little bit on the uphills. You know, an alpine ski could be double that in certain instances. So weight and early rise are two of your primary concerns right there, but there are a ton of great skis out right now. And, you know, like I said, every year somebody has a new brand that I've never even heard of. So there's a ton of good ones out there. This is a Blizzard ski right there. This is one of their very good backcountry skis called a 0G, which is a great ski, 105 millimeters underfoot, but also a really nice ski. And now we can start talking about bindings, right? So the bindings at first glance are the things that look the most different between an alpine binding and a backcountry binding. So we call these tech bindings. Most hardcore backcountry skiers are skiing a tech binding. We'll talk about a couple other options in a sec, but tech binding has got quite a different look on the toe. This is the toe of the binding, and you see those little pins or spikes on the side. Those will clip into a spot on the boot. I'll show you in just a moment. And that lever on the front is how you release the binding or click it up when you're touring. And I tend to ski with a leash. That's what that little stretchy cord is. I don't have brakes on my ski. It seems like you're either skiing really deep snow or very firm snow, and a brake tends not to work quite as much, and it's a little heavier. So I just use a leash. It's attached to my boot, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in a sec. But that's an overview of what a tech toe looks like. People will call them, the original tech binding was a Dynafit, and they're a little fiddly when you first get them. So people will call them Dynafiddles. So I really recommend, if you're new to the sport and you just got a tech binding, take out your skis, put them on the carpet, step into them, 10 or 15 times with your boots. So that way, when you're out on the snow, you're a little bit more familiar with them, because they can be a little fumbly at first. But that's a tech binding right there. There's a image from the side. So I showed you that toe, and you can see this binding is actually in tour mode right now. So that little blue tab in front of the toe is popped up. When you're skiing, it's down flat, but that just keeps it a little attached to your binding a little more securely while you're going uphill. We'll talk about the uphill mode in just a sec. If you look at the heel, you see that right there. You can see those pins, the silver part of the pins, those slide into the back side of the boot. So you step into the binding, you stomp down a little bit, and those pins go into a mount in the back of the boot. And that's your connection to the ski. So you can see these are much lighter, a bit less robust than an alpine binding, but they're way more efficient going uphill. And this binding right here weighs 200 grams. So it's probably a quarter the weight of many alpine bindings. So you really like that on the uphill. And it'll save you a ton of energy, but they ski very well on the down. And then that heel, you can release those pins in the heel of the boot, and then you can stride going uphill. I've got a photo of a boot here in a minute with it's going uphill. And so you can run them with or without brakes. As I said, I don't typically have one set with brakes. Most of the time though, I like to use a leash instead, just in case, my ski came off in a crash or something, I don't lose it down the hill. But these bindings are much lighter. They're also a little more fragile, so we got to take care of them. So we tend to, try not to drop them in the parking lot or do whatever. Pardon me. Sorry. So we baby them a little bit, but you can ski them pretty darn hard. and they're pretty durable. And there's a bunch of brands out there. There's Dynafits, G3s, Black Diamond. That's just a rebranded ATK. That's an Italian company. They make a really nice, well-made binding. And then Plume is French. Marker, I think, is Austrian. But there's a bunch of these bindings out now. The original patent ran out, so you can find bunches of different models of these tech bindings. So they have pins in the toe and then those pins in the heel. And they're just lighter and tour much better. You'll see. We'll talk about another option here in a sec. There's the toe of a touring boot, and that's the little dimple into which those pins clip. So that's why it can be a little fiddly, because you got to get those pins right in the little holes in the boot. And that metal insert you're looking at right there, that's actually set into the plastic when they're molding the boot, and it's all hot. Right, so it's a permanent part of the boot. It's very securely built into it, and if you damage that little insert, the boot is effectively ruined for using with a tech binding. So we try to, not smash those into rocks and do all this kind of stuff. You often can't help it. So I've been backcountry skiing now for going on 20 years, and I've damaged one dimple one time. So it's not a common thing, but there's just no reason to be smashing those dimples around or something like that. So that's the toe. You can see the welt, or the little tab on the front of that boot there, is a bit smaller than a normal Alpine boot. And that's because on a tech binding, you're not using that toe tab to step into the binding. Some backcountry boots have a toe tab big enough you can use a step-in binding, some don't. This is a Dynafit boot that really is focused on being lightweight. So that one doesn't have a pronounced toe tab. So it's big enough to take a crampon if you're using a boot crampon, but not quite to use in a step-in binding, that you might use on an Alpine binding, something like that. There's a close-up of the heel. You can see those heel pins now. And that blue little mechanism on top of the binding there, that's called a riser. I'll show you another version of that. But if you're going up a very steep hill, you can flip that forward and stand on it. And this binding is made in such a way that you can just leave the heel piece in that same position and stand on that heel riser if you're okay, or just turn it all the way around and then you can be flat on the ski. So it gives you a couple different positions like that. I like this one. It's a Black Diamond Helio. It's 200 grams, very light, but still adjustable. Pretty cool, right? So there's the boot inside the binding now affixed to it. You can see those pins have snapped into the dimples on the boot, and you can see that leash is attached to that little piece of string in the boot. So that's my system right there. These are my skis and boots. This is what I do. And you'll notice I made a note there. The leash is breakable because in the event of an avalanche, you do not want your skis staying on your feet. So that leash will, the skis will come off my feet. These are releasable bindings. And then that leash will most likely break in an avalanche, something like that. I've never had that happen. I don't plan on it happening, but you kind of prepare for that and think ahead. And the bindings are releasable and, maybe not quite as reliable in a bench test as an Alpine binding, but they release fairly reliably and they do a good job of it. So most of us are skiing on these tech bindings right now. If a tech binding and being in the backcountry all the time isn't your cup of tea, then what we're going to do, you guys can see my wife walking in the back there. Hi, Rebel. Hi. She's back there with the dogs. And she was just on another Zoom call in the other area of the house. So if a tech binding is too light, or you feel like you're going to maybe ski in the resort most of the time and only do backcountry a couple days, you can get what's called a hybrid binding. Okay. And so a hybrid binding blends the touring function of a touring binding with a little more release function and sort of familiarity of an Alpine binding. So I'll show you one of those right now. This is a Fritchie, which is a Swiss brand. They make great stuff. And they make, let's see, Marker makes a hybrid binding now. Solomon makes one. I'm sure I'm missing somebody. But these are a great, like, I'm going to ski mostly on the piste, mostly at the resort, and I might want to try some backcountry skiing, or maybe I'm just going to go a few times a year. This binding, if I'm not mistaken, weighs around 600 grams. So it's 3 times the weight of that Helio that I just showed you. But you can see the heel piece looks much more familiar. If you're an Alpine skier, you just step right into it, right? And this binding is interesting. It has little sort of small heel pins that'll mesh with a backcountry boot, but it also has a step-in function that, steps into the heel welt on an Alpine boot. This is a tried and true binding. It's been out for several years. I really like it, actually. I have it on one. This is a heavier setup for me. So I go, once my sons were old enough to start skiing on the piste, I wanted sort of a inbounds, out of bounds ski. And so I just got this. It's a Black Crow ski. It's quite a bit heavier. And then it has a more of an Alpine heel, and you see brakes on it right there. So, and then the toe is sort of a hybrid as well. It has pins on the side, and then it has that more robust toe tab, but it has a release plate, that black plastic part. And so it releases more like an Alpine binding. Maybe it's safer for the knees. I'm not totally sure. And people debate about that. And but the heel will release. So I'll show you another photo there. The heel will release. That's that same binding. The heel will release, and you can go uphill. So this is the boot clipped into the toe. You can see the toe tab is pulled up, so it's in a tour mode. And this is how you would stride uphill. So it just gives you some touring function like that, and a little bit heavier binding, and a little more familiar for most people that are touring and whatnot. So. And each of these is a bit different. So depending on what model you get, you're going to have to just learn the ins and outs of it like that. This is the Fritchie. So you can see that heel piece slides backwards, and then the release tab thing lever is straight up and down. That's how you know it's in a tour mode and the brakes stay up. So, but if you got a marker one or whatever, they all work a little bit differently, and you'll just get used to it. It's not rocket science. Now you can see here's in tour mode as well, but now that silver piece that's under my heel, that's your riser. And so that means it just elevates your heel a little bit. And so you can imagine if the ski was on a steep slope, you would have a sensation of standing more flat than having to lean forward and really flex your ankle. So that's what a riser does for you. I try to avoid using them. I just try to keep my skin track angle low and stay comfortable and whatnot, but some people have different approaches, whatever. Now here's that same binding in ski mode. So now you can almost see that toe lever is down flat. That's how the Fritchie is in ski mode. And then the binding in the back is now, it just looks like a regular Alpine binding. So most first-time backcountry skiers, or they're looking just to try it out, they'll go with a hybrid binding, something like that. It's a great choice. So if you got more questions, we can talk more about them. So looking at the boots, though, you can see the one on the right, the Technica, it looks much more like an Alpine boot, although it is a backcountry boot as well. It has a toe dimples you can see in the toe right there, and then it has a walk mode as well. So this walk mode is what really separates a backcountry boot from an Alpine boot, and it just releases that cuff so you can flex your ankle backwards and forwards, and it's still rigid side to side, but it will allow you to really stride and take a much more natural gait when you're going uphill. The boot on the left is quite a bit lighter. It's about 1,000 grams. The one on the right, I think, is 1,500. These are both mine. So these are my two backcountry boots. The one on the left is quite a bit lighter, and I use that most of the time, especially in soft snow. But the one on the right sure skis nice too. So those are really nice. And they're typically a little softer in terms of forward flex than an Alpine boot, although you can beef them up a little bit. And they're typically a little bit wider fit in the toe that keeps your circulation going. So that's nice. And I find them much more comfortable than an Alpine boot, but maybe that's just because I've not had an Alpine boot in a lot of years. So, and my last little thought on that is, if you're gonna spend cash on anything, like buy something brand new and pay full retail, boots are the way to go, because you really got to keep your feet warm and comfortable in the backcountry, especially going uphill and these longer days out and about. So think about spending some cash on boots. You can kind of get by on used gear for anything else. So there's that Technica boot again. And there's that walk mechanism. The boots, there's a bunch of great brands: Scarpa, Technica, Dynafit. They all make really nice boots. Scott makes good backcountry boots, and they all have a slightly different walk mechanism that just releases the cuff, lets you go uphill. And then many times the buckles and things like that are field serviceable. So if I break one of those in the field, which I've done a couple of times, not a lot, but if you step on rocks, or you scrape the boot along rocks while we're climbing around, you can shear one of those off, or the walk mechanism might break. So often on a trip, I'll have these things along with me in the field, and you can fix it back at the hut, or sit down and fix it right there. So, and then you can see that liner sticking out of the top. That's actually an aftermarket liner that I purchased. The best ones are made in Canada called, they're made by Intuition. And it'll cost you $175 for the liner and probably another $50 to get somebody to heat it up and mold it to your foot. If you're really into backcountry skiing, I'd say it's probably worth the money to do that. If you're just trying it out, you can get away with just stepping into the boot, and over a couple of weeks, that foam will mold to your foot. Heat molding, it just does a little bit more precise job, and it's a quicker fix. So that's boots. Get ones that fit, get ones that are comfortable, and have a professional boot fitter fit them if you're having any drama or you have weird feet. My feet are pretty normal. And so I get away with just a single, boot fit, and then I'm done with it usually. All right, how do we go uphill, right? You've got tour mode on your bindings, you've got walk mode on your boots, and now you got to put something on the bottom of your skin to make it stick to the snow. So we use these skins. Like, these skins were originally, they were seal skin. And believe it or not, people were skiing in Scandinavia, northern Russia, and China, several thousand years ago, it looks like. But we have since graduated from seal skins to nylon and mohair. Mohair is the fiber from an Angora goat, and it's a natural material. And so they figure out a way to put them on this backing right there that has glue on the other side. So we stick that glue to the bottom of our skin. You put the clip over that wire black part over the shovel of your ski, and affix these to the bottom of your ski, and then you go uphill. And they work really, really well. Every night we try to dry them out, hang them up. Not over really high heat, but somewhere that's warm and dry. So near the wood burning stove, or often the huts in Canada will have a drying room that has just a space heater in there, something like that. And there's a bunch of good skins too. Black Diamond makes them. These are contour skins you're looking at. Pomoka are really good. Coltex are super high quality. They all have slightly different attachment systems at the tip and the tail. Most people are still using a glue skin, so it has an actual adhesive. That's what that gummy black looking stuff. These are old, and I've got them a little dirty, but on the bottom of the skin plush there are some glueless ones these days. They work very well if you take care of them in the field, which is to say keep them warm and keep them dry. So when they're not on the bottom of your skis, they're often inside your jacket while you're skiing. I'll show you a photo of my buddy Paul skiing with his in his jacket. But just keep them clean. The advantage of any of the glueless ones is if you drop it in the ash by the fireplace or pine needles outdoors, you can just brush that stuff off, or even clean them with some warm water and sort of rejuvenate them. The glue ones are really tough to clean once they're dirty, so you got to baby those a little bit more in a slightly different way. So that's skins. And that's kind of the whole package, how we go uphill: skins and skis and boots and bindings, right? So let's talk a little bit about safety equipment. So that's beacon, shovel, probe often. There you go. So beacons or transceivers, some people will call them. There's a bunch of good brands: Peeps, Mammut, Ortovox. Black Diamond has some of theirs branded. It's just a Peeps beacon. Backcountry Access, based in Boulder, Colorado. They're good friends of mine. I've skied with their beacons a lot, on and off over the years. They're all great. They all function with 3 antennas inside and at the same frequency, so there's no compatibility issues really. And they have slightly, different bells and whistles. So again, you're going to have to just have that user's manual on your phone when you go into the field, and you want to figure out all the little ins and outs of your beacon, right? So there's a shovel right there. We really try to push people to use a steel or aluminum shovel, no carbon fiber, no plastic, certainly no plastic. And that's one of my favorite ones. It's made by Mammut, and it's an extendable handle, but it's still compact and light. I really like it. And then the probes often come in aluminum, and occasionally you'll get some in carbon fiber. The carbon is a really nice weight savings. But if you're using it a lot, like on a companion rescue course or practicing quite a bit, they're a little more fragile than the aluminum. The aluminum will bend a little bit before it breaks. Often carbon doesn't do much until, it just snaps. And I own both. And so, whatever, choose whatever you think. There's some transceivers right there. So often people will ask, hey, which is the best one? What does, this or that or this or that? And most of them are pretty darn good these days. And you really just got to get it and practice with it and get familiar with the features so that you're not fumbling with it in the field. And I own several beacons, and I like different aspects of different ones. That Peeps Micro is the one right there on the right that I ski with most, just because it's tiny. It has a single battery. and it's really lightweight, and it's 3 antennas. It's accurate. It has great range. It marks reliably. I really liked it. But Barryvox S on the left is another great one. I just got a Backcountry Access Tracker 4, which seems like a sweet one. It's in my stuff being shipped from France right now, so I don't have it with me. But anyway, really, there's great beacons out there. Just get one and practice with it, right? Treat it like an iPhone. Keep it dry. Don't smash it around. And keep in mind that this is using radio waves to find another beacon, so you don't want to interfere with it. So if you are searching with it, it's going to be interfered by a phone nearby it, power lines, battery heated gloves, a GPS watch. Anything electronic is going to bug these things, even the ignition switch on a snowmobile. So they'll talk about that when you do a companion rescue class, right? So really dive into the beacon you buy and figure out what batteries does it like, because they don't all agree on which batteries to use. Figure out how to use the search function, the marking function, and some of them, like these two right here, have a trailhead check. So you really want to know what that is, why to use it, and what it's helping you do. Some of them don't do it, like the Tracker 4 does not do it, whereas these two have a specific trailhead check, and it can be an advantage in certain situations, but figure that out. And then just practice with it. I would say practice a few times a year. And if you're new to the sport, practice, at least every month, and really get familiar with it. Go out to a park somewhere and run yourself through some scenarios, right? All right, the backpack. This is just a pretty common little touring pack. You can see it's just a plain old backpack, except it has this tools pocket on the outside. And that's where you put your shovel, the shovel handle, and the probe. You do not want to put your shovel on the outside of the pack, because if you crash or get avalanched, it's going to get torn off. And I've only really witnessed one person take a really bad fall skiing, and his backpack tore open. All this stuff came flying out, and certainly everything on the outside was strewn all over the slope. So anything inside the pack, you're more likely to have it in the event of a crash or an avalanche, something like that. And just get a pack that's comfortable and that has a tools pocket on it. You can, first few times, if you want to go and check it out, see if you like backcountry skiing, you can certainly get away with a regular backpack. But most ski touring packs are going to have a means to carry skis as well. So that's another consideration you want to think about. And, once you're on a companion rescue course, or you're doing these practice days with your beacon, practice with your shovel and your probe too. You want to make sure you can get your shovel and probe out of your backpack efficiently and assemble them pretty quickly. If you spend 3 or 4 minutes doing that, you're wasting time that your buddy might be buried. So again, I haven't had to ding anybody up. I've never been dug up. I don't want you to think it certainly should not be a regular part of backcountry skiing for anybody. But you got to be ready for it. So that's where the companion rescue course and the backpack and all this stuff comes in. So, all right. So you've got some gear. You've got skis attached to your feet. It's time to go skiing. You got to figure out where and what you're going to do, right? So the main thing we're thinking about here is, are you in or out of avalanche terrain? If you're not in avalanche terrain or below avalanche terrain, you can't get smoked in an avalanche, which is good. So that's the main thing, especially when you're starting out, is you really just want to be conservative with your terrain choices. Make sure you're not in avalanche terrain. And as you get more familiar with the sport and take a course, you can start easing into it, right? So that's pretty darn good skiing right there. That's my buddy Paul. You can see he's got skins in his jacket there. This was a really cold day. He's got the hood up. He's wearing his puffy. And, on days like this, you want to put your skins inside your jacket, and that'll make them sticky on your skis for the next time up the hill. That's a little tip for you. Now look at the terrain he's skiing. It looks like pretty good skiing, right? But it's a really low angle slope. So this is not avalanche terrain right here. So if you stick to terrain like this, you really don't need to worry about the avalanche problem. You just need to make darn sure you're not in avalanche terrain or below avalanche terrain, right? So that can be a little tricky to figure out sometimes, but that's what a good level 1 avalanche course will do for you. Now, this looks a little more serious, right? This is a bigger slope, a little steeper, and this is certainly avalanche terrain right here. This is my buddy Tim skiing. I'm going to teach a level 2 avalanche course with him this year up in Canada, and we made a really careful choice this day skiing on that slope. You can see it's phenomenal skiing, not very many tracks around, and but you have to be careful easing into this terrain, right? So let's think about these two things, right? You want to get good turns. These were good turns. Tim had a great run, and we had a great day this day. We got a bunch of untracked turns all over around this lodge. But that said, you really want to make sure you're getting those turns in the context of staying safe, right? So we try to minimize our exposure to avalanche terrain unless we're really confident that we're not going to have an avalanche occur or be too close to any. So this is what a level 1 does for you. It really helps you download the bulletin, interpret it, things like that, and most of all, identify avalanche terrain so that you can avoid it, right? So there's if you're going to remember one thing from this whole presentation, right? If you're not in avalanche terrain, you can't get killed by an avalanche, right? But that said, there have been people that are totally convinced they're not in avalanche terrain, and then they have an avalanche accident. So it really takes some preparation and a little bit of study, and that'll help you avoid any problems with this kind of thing. So, so these are these 2 things to focus on. The first season is correctly identifying what is and is not avalanche terrain. I can't say this enough, because on a day where it's high avalanche danger, most people just say, oh, we're not going to go skiing or go to the ski hill, and that's totally reasonable. But you can go skiing in the backcountry. You just need to be darn sure that you are not on avalanche slopes or below avalanche slopes on that day. And so that takes a little bit of doing, right? So part of our prep is obviously checking the avalanche bulletin wherever you live. There's some folks, I know there's avalanche forecasting up in Scotland. I've met a couple of those forecasters. Sandy Allen, who's a legendary alpinist from Scotland. I met him in a hut one time. We were chatting about his job as a forecaster in Scotland, but they're all over North America and Europe. If you need help, you can go to avalanche.org in the United States, and it's got a link to every avalanche center in North America, and they're all over Europe. So we read that every single day, even on the days where I'm not skiing or working. I'll read that just to see, hey, what's happening in the mountains? Is it a big storm with avalanche danger? Is it improving and things are moving towards low avalanche danger? Whatever the situation is, right? And so if we're really attentive to the terrain we're skiing in, and for that first year, I'd say maybe just avoid avalanche terrain altogether, and we're reading the bulletin every day, that's going to go a long way to help keeping you safer in the backcountry, right? All right, and here's my buddy Nate. I was just texting with him a few minutes ago on the left, and my buddy Nino, I was just climbing with him in Vegas on the right. That's me in the middle, and we're looking at a slope, deciding, hey, is this a good idea or a bad idea? This was avalanche terrain we were skiing in, and both Nate and Nino are mountain guides as well. And so we put all 3 of our heads together and say, hey, am I missing something here? Does this seem good to you? What are you seeing? And you really got to be open to that and have a chat. And so some of the things that are going to help you identify and avoid avalanche terrain will be guidebooks. Most guidebooks these days will give you a sense of how steep is the slope, how prone to avalanching is it, and they can warn you about certain conditions like south-facing slopes. When you get those first big warm-ups during the year in March, those can be more prone to avalanching, and a good guidebook's going to help you keep tabs on that. Maps, a good level 1 will help you identify avalanche terrain from a topographical map, paper or digital, and there's some tools online that'll give you nice suggestion about what avalanche terrain is. They give an indication of how steep a slope might be, something like that. And once we're in the field, there are several ways you can identify avalanche slopes. Hopefully by now I'm a little better at it after 20 years backcountry skiing and 40 years skiing. I can hopefully look at a slope and say, oh, that's starting to look pretty steep. Is that an avalanche slope? And we can check on a map, or use a clinometer, which is a little tool you can estimate slope angle in the field with, things like that. So you got a bunch of ways of identifying avalanche terrain even before you leave the hut or the trailhead. And I would recommend everybody start getting good at that. And another big consideration is who you're skiing with, right? So that's my buddy Tim again. There's me and Tim just before that photo was taken, actually. We're up at the top. That's our friend Nino out there looking at the slope. And you can see this is a pretty real terrain right there. It's really good skiing. You can see us standing around in soft snow. But this is the kind of terrain you want to have really discussed before you're standing there. So we discussed where we're going to ski in a guide meeting that morning. And then we're out there and saying, oh, okay, now we're on the top of this. This peak is called South Seaman Peak. And now we're looking at it saying, hey, does this match what the bulletin was saying? Does this match what we were expecting to see? Is it worse in terms of avalanche hazard, or is it better? Is there more or less snow? Things like that. These are the discussions you're having, and having a good team will help you have those discussions in a efficient and productive manner, right? So here's some more folks practicing their digging. We're just practicing. No one's actually buried right there. That's why Matt and his buddy are looking pretty relaxed and happy. But a reliable, communicative, skilled teammate with whom you can work is ideal, right? Because you're going to have disagreements too. One person may say, hey, this slope looks nutty. What are we thinking? And I might be saying like, no, let's, this seems like a great idea. You've got to be able to disagree, change your mind. And if somebody just says, hey, this is not the slope to be on today, I need to be flexible enough to say, hey, okay, we'll opt to do the more conservative ski run, and we can chat about it later. But if you get a person who's really stubborn, can't change their mind, never says, I don't know, things like that, that might not be the best person to ski with, right? So try to choose those partners you can work with that have similar ski skills as well. If, one person's a really weak skier and the other person's a fantastic skier, that might be a little frustrating. Fitness as well. If I show up, I'm just back from Europe, I've got a little muffin top going, I admit it, I indulged the last month I was in Chamonix. And so if I'm really lagging on the uphills and you're looking to charge and get a workout in, that also might be a kind of a mismatch in terms of ski partners and our goals as well. If I just want to get on top of every peak I see, and I don't care necessarily about finding POW down in the trees, but you're looking to just get deep, maybe we're not the best partners on that day. And risk tolerance too. Some people are willing to break legs and jump off cliffs and do all this. I'm 51 years old with twins and a wife, and so I tend to come back and want to be in one piece at the end of the day. So just think about that kind of stuff, right? So who you're skiing with too, you can see that was another good ski day right there up in Canada. But it's good to have a team and talk about hey, who's bringing a med kit, a repair kit. Let's all check the bulletin together, and it doesn't have to be a big 45-minute process in the morning, but you should spend some time over breakfast. Maybe it's even in the car, but you got to go through a checklist. Who's got a med kit? Who's got a repair kit? What's our avalanche danger on the day? What problems are we facing? What terrain are they seeing avalanches in? And incorporate that all together as a team decision, right? And often on these webinars, one of the things after all this chitter chatter I'm doing is people will say, well, what do I, how good of a skier do I need to be to get into the backcountry? And I would say if you're an intermediate to advanced skier on the piste, you can probably go in the backcountry and have some fun. The backcountry, one of the challenges is that snow tends to be much more variable. Obviously, you don't have those pisteurs flattening out the runs every night in those snow caps and things like that. So you will have more variable snow, unpredictable snow, and some days it's really crappy skiing, I'll be totally honest. But that is going to make you a much, much, much better skier, is tackling all those different snow types. You go back on the piste, you're going to be like, oh, wow, this is easy. So I would say at least intermediate ski skills. If you're not that great a skier, take some lessons. When I started trying to get into guiding, I had already been skiing, I can't remember, 25 years. I, had a friend, Kevin Jordan, hi Kevin, who helped me out. He's a PSIA demo team guy now. He just made it last year. And he just had phenomenal corrections and little tips to do. That really helped my backcountry skiing as well. So, and I still do that. I try to watch YouTube videos and go ski. And then I would say enough general fitness. If you can go hiking for 4, 5, 6 hours right now, you're probably fit enough to go skiing for several hours as well. You'll get used to it. You're going to have a lot of weight on your feet, and that's a little bit of a wake-up call the first time you go out. I will hike in the fall with leg weights on my ankles. My buddy Chris Erickson makes fun of me. Hey, Chris. It is kind of goofy, but it tends to get my legs a little more used to having all that weight down on your ankles and feet, and which is nice. And so your hip flexors aren't screaming at you when you're going uphill. So those are some ideas, general ideas, things like that. All right. I mentioned a bunch of different stuff, but here's some resources. You can take a photo of this or email me later. And I'll have my email at the end here, where you can get a bunch more info on gear, avalanche safety, things like that. I love those first 2 books are ebooks, Doug Littmer's Guide to Avalanche Terrain and Bruce Jamison's Backcountry Avalanche Awareness. Those are both ebooks. You Google them, you'll find them. And then Bruce Tremper's book has kind of been the Bible in English as the intro read on staying alive in avalanche terrain. I think it's in its 4th edition now. It's a great book. And you can find an avalanche course all over North America and Europe. Certainly start on 57 hours and look there. And, my ski days and rock climbing days and things like that, people will book me through 57 hours and it'll give you some information. But your local avalanche center often has links to them. and ask around, word of mouth. Social media, I encourage people to see what other people are doing, but be a little bit careful on social media and don't start making terrain choices based on where Joe Pro skied yesterday. That happens quite a bit in Chamonix. And just be a little bit, take that stuff with a grain of salt, because you don't know what that person knows necessarily. And then for those of you just starting out, my buddy Will's blog, Where the Fruit Is, has a pretty good backcountry ski kind of intro primer on what you're going to need, what you're going to do, things like that. So that can be helpful. So search for that. So and then you can get out there in the terrain, and if you're lucky, you'll have a bunch of days like this. This is my buddy John Maroney. I was just climbing with Maroney in Vegas, and on this day though, we were at the Italian Alps of the Gran Paradiso hut, and it was trench town, as you can see. It was phenomenal skiing, really great. And hopefully your days are like this, pretty manageable. But you want to ease into these kinds of days too, where it's a whiteout, you're on a glacier, rope to another person right here. So you want to ease into it. So pick your days. And if things seem overwhelming and there's too much uncertainty, you don't know about this avalanche problem or where you're skiing or whatever, maybe it's a day to just stay at the resort and get some pow turns wherever you go. But backcountry skiing can be phenomenal. This is another lodge up in Canada, Sorcerer Lodge. It's called the Wizard Gullies. This was an incredible day. That's one of the better ski days of my life right there, I think. And the backcountry thing is really nice because it just allows you to get all sorts of places and see some really beautiful landscapes. And most of all, keep it fun. There's my buddy Connie having a good time, and on a cold day up in Canada, and that was a fun trip. So we have a little bit of time for Q&A right now. If anybody's got questions, you can play Stump the Chump with me and do that. You can see my email address is down there at the bottom. By all means, I mean it when I say email me. If you're buying a pair of skis, or you're going to Canada for the first time, or you're going to be down in Taos and you don't know where to ski, I'll try to hook you up with somebody who knows what's going on. And you can follow 57 Hours up there on Instagram and see what sort of trips they're doing. They've got stuff all over the planet. It's really cool. It's been fun partnering with these guys since they got it going. But yeah, if we got questions, we can certainly chat now. And what's best, Maya? Should I unscreen share or just leave it there? I don't know what works.
You can stop sharing so people can see us in full screen. Yes.
There we go. All right.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Rob, for sharing your knowledge and advice with everybody. I hope you learned something new today. Okay, I think we can just now jump and answer some questions.
Cool.
So maybe I will just go right from the top. We have quite a few questions about the gears. So Stephen is asking, what is your take on the atomic flex bindings?
The atomic flex, I think, is just what Atomic is calling a Solomon shift. Is that correct? Sorry if I don't know this. I don't own that binding. I think that's correct, though. Yeah, because Solomon and Atomic are owned or something by the same company, or I don't know what the thing is. But to be totally frank with you, I've seen on that first year those were out. I saw a bunch of them glitch in the field that had something to do with the rear brake. And they were a little tweaky in the field. I think probably they have fixed that. But for me, like when I bought a pieced setup, I got that Frischi Tecton. The Frischi Tecton is a little, it's been out for several years. They've got it all ironed out. The one downside I'll say with the Tecton is there's a lot of plastic in it. So to me, it seems like you're more likely to probably break it. I would do a little more reading maybe on like the TGR forum and some other forums and ask around to make sure that Solomon Shift, Atomic Flex binding, they've gotten some glitchiness worked out. So anyway, cool.
Okay, thanks. Bert is asking, at what position do you mount a tour binding on the ski?
Yeah, great question. So for folks who don't know what we're talking about, a ski will come what they call flapped, meaning there's no binding on it, right? So you'll often see like skis listed as flat. In the middle of the ski, there's often a mark that tells you the middle of the ski. Now, if the ski's 200 centimeters long, there's going to be a mark right in that middle center at 100 centimeters from the tip of the tail. Now, the weird thing about backcountry skis is you might have a ski that's, let's say 200 centimeters, just because I'm terrible at math. And the middle might be 100 centimeters. But if that early rise tip takes up 35 centimeters of the ski, that part of the ski, the edge, is often less in contact, if not totally off the snow. So now if you put the binding right in the center, the ski might ski a little funny because you have less edge in the front as compared to the back. So you will often hear people say, oh, I bought a Dynastar M99 Tour, and but I mounted it 2 centimeters forward or back or whatever. Okay. So in answer to your question, it's going to depend a little bit on the shape of the ski and how much early rise or rocker it has. Okay. So what I would do is ask the shop tech where you bought the ski, if you bought it online or from a person or something like that, jump on the forums and try to ask around a little bit, because center mounting the ski really works for some skis. Other skis, it's going to totally hose you. And so a lot of people will have strong opinions about where to mount it. I didn't grow up ski racing, so I'm a little less finicky with my skis about like, half centimeter forward or back or whatever. But I'll do a little bit of research and just see if everybody sounds like, oh, I mounted them in the center, and then, a month later I went to my ski tech and had to move the binding 2 centimeters back. Then maybe I'll listen to that and ask around a little bit. So it's going to really depend on the ski you buy. So do a little bit of homework, ask around, Google it, do whatever. If you're totally striking out, hit me up on email and I'll try to ask some friends if they're skiing a particular ski. And we'll do that.
Okay, thanks, Rob. And yes, if you have any additional questions, even after the webinar for Rob, you just can send us an email. We can connect you directly with him. It is no problem at all. So next question, can you use a backcountry boot for alpine skiing?
It is going to depend on the binding system you have. So for example, that Dynafit TLT boot, they keep that thing really light. It's crazy light. You could go running in the things. They're amazing. But the toe tab is not long enough, wide enough to really use in an alpine binding. The toe would just pop right out, right? So again, it's going to depend on the backcountry boot you get. That Technica boot I have, the one that was a little heavier, a little bigger, a little taller, that one has enough of a tab and enough of a heel tab that you can use it in a step-in binding. Now, the problem is with a backcountry boot, they're going to have a rubber sole because we're walking around in them, right? So that might just mean walking around in the parking lot, but often it means we put the skis on our back and we could scramble around on rocks if we're trying to get to a ski run. If you're in Europe and you're climbing up to the hut, sometimes that's on a ladder. And so an alpine boot is going to have a flat plastic sole, right? And that works really well on that release plate in the toe. It slides right off of there. The backcountry boot is going to have a little bit of curve under your toes. That's called rocker, and it's going to be rubber. So most ski shops will, I don't know about most, many ski shops will not mount and test a backcountry boot in an alpine binding because it's got that rubber sole which can make it hang up on a release plate. So often they make you sign an extra waiver, or they may just say like, hey, we don't certify this work or something like that. So A, it's going to depend on the boot you have, and B, it's going to depend a little bit on the binding you're using. So just be a little bit strategic when you're buying a boot, binding, whatever. Some of the boots as well, I know Scarpa has done this in the past. Some of the AT boots, the touring boots, backcountry boots, will have a plate on the bottom with screws in it, and you can unscrew a rubber walking sole and put on like a flat alpine sole. That is an option as well. And then that boot will really behave more like an alpine boot in an alpine binding. So hopefully that's not too convoluted, but you've got a ton of options. So just shoot me an email about specific stuff and I can do some research with you, or just ask, the ski tech where you bought your boots, and maybe she can, brainstorm with you and say like, nah, avoid this binding or do whatever. So.
Great, thanks, Rob. Next question. Could you talk about pre-season training? What exercises are ideal to get you ready for the demands of backcountry skiing?
Perfect. Great. Okay. Great question. There's tons of programs out there. I know my buddy Connie, that woman who was in that last slide laughing, having a good time. Connie does ski specific workouts out of her gym in Colorado. It's called the Alpine Training Center. She's really focused on training climbers and skiers. And you can buy her workouts on Train Heroic. That's one option. Some people hire a coach on like Uphill Athlete. My buddy Jason is a coach on Uphill Athlete. If you want to get in touch with him, Jason Hansen. So they could like write a training plan and do all this kind of stuff for you. That's an option, but there's a ton of information online. What I'm doing personally is I trained with Connie for, more than 10 years in Boulder when I was living there, Colorado. And so having some familiarity with her workouts and approach now, I have been doing a lot of one-legged things. So like step ups onto a box with maybe a 20-pound backpack. And you want to isolate your legs as much as possible. So doing a back squat is great, but you're using 2 legs. And so I'll do that on occasion. But then doing box steps, you're isolating each leg, because skiing is really, your legs are often acting independently of one another. So you want to make sure both legs are strong. And so one-legged box step-ups, box jumps can be really good. I still do back squats. I do some deadlifting. And in the gym, I'll often do a bunch of like abdominal and lower back exercises. I bought one of those. Luckily in France, we were there for COVID. And right as COVID started in the lockdowns, I mail ordered one of those TRX things, or the black and yellow thing you see hanging in the gym. And that thing is a freaking torture device. And you go online, they've got, if you want to train your like front and neck muscles, they've got a way to like rig that thing up and do it. So I use that for my abs, low back, and some ice climbing stuff specifically. So I just try to do a bunch of like bigger movements, like deadlifts are great, squats are great, box jumps can be great. I trail run a bunch, and I'm in a little bit of a pickle right now because all my stuff is in a container coming from France. It is cleared customs in Los Angeles, but it is somewhere between Los Angeles and Washington State right now. I have no idea where it's taking forever. So I really have trail running shoes, and I've been going to the rock climbing gym. So I'm using their weights and just, it's whatever. So I'm battling them up on top. We'll see. Anyway, hopefully that helps you, but you could just Google ski training or hit me up and I'll connect you with Connie. She can give you some advice, or buy a training program from her. There's a ton of good stuff. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Next question. Are certain skin materials better for certain types of snow?
Yeah, great question. Often on really refrozen hard snow. So this can be springtime or snow that had a little bit of rain on it, refroze. Nylon is going to work way better. So an all nylon skin. Almost everybody makes an all nylon skin. They will glide a little bit less than a mohair skin, but they're going to be way more durable and have better grip. So if you live in a climate like where I am in the Cascades now, often we'll have rain on top of snow and then it refreezes. Can be tricky. Having a nylon skin might be a good idea. I typically just go with a mix of nylon and mohair, and I try to keep the skin track angle low. That way I'm not worried about the skin slipping. If you're sort of fitness touring, or God forbid you want to do a skimo race, they're super fun, but God, they're hard. Mohair is the way to go. They glide much better. They're lighter, and the skin itself is like a little smaller and lighter when you put it in your jacket. So I typically do like a 70-30 blend. I love that Pomoka. It's sort of like a sea foam green color. I think they call it the Climb Pro Glide or something. The Black Diamond mohair mix is pretty nice. I think G3 just redid all their skins a year or two ago. I haven't used them yet, but there's a bunch of options out there. So depending on where you live, but just for general skiing, like a 70-30 nylon mohair skin with glue on the bottom instead of glueless, that's probably a good starter skin for almost everybody. So.
And also, we have one question that is related to glue versus non-glue skins. Can you maybe explain that a little bit more detail?
Which one? Any for cleaning?
For cleaning as well, but Kent is also asking your personal perspective on glue versus non-glue skins.
Okay, so let's talk about glue skins first. So most skins are going to have glue on them. There are some glueless we'll talk about in a sec, but the glue is really sticky. Okay, so if you drop that thing in the gravel in the parking lot, you're going to pick it up and it is going to look like almond roca or something. It's going to have gravel all over the freaking thing. Don't do it. Okay. if you do get your skin really, really dirty, and eventually over a course of 4 or 5 seasons, that picks up some pine needles here, there, and whatever, there are ways to clean them. Some shops will do it for you. What I have done in the past, being a cheapskate, is you spread the skin out on a bench with the glue side up, and I'll often pluck off all the stuff I can get, like pieces of gravel or pine needles, and then you take a grocery bag, so like the brown paper bag, put that over the skin, and you can iron through it. So that warms up the glue, and then I'll take like a straight edge or a ski scraper, and I'll scrape the dirty glue off and add new glue. That's one way to do it. There's videos online if you look on YouTube. There are also these things that it is like an entire sheet and you roll it out on the skin once you've cleaned it, and then you iron that on. I have not used those. I think Black Diamond still sells them. That's a way to sort of reapply a whole new layer of glue on there. Though that can be useful. The main thing though is just don't get them dirty if you can help it. So be careful with them. Okay, so that's glue skins. Glueless, Gecko I think were the first ones, and now Contour makes a really good glueless skin, which I've used a lot. That's probably the one I've used the most, around the 3rd generation. I think Gecko skins you can still get maybe in Europe, I don't know here. And I think maybe Pomoka and Coltex are doing them now too. The glueless skins are great. They solve one problem, which is that if you drop your skin in the dirt or something, you haven't just like complicated your life. You can kind of dust that stuff off. If they do get dirty, really dirty, you can wash them with warm soap and water gently. But in the field, they're really sensitive to getting moisture and being super cold. So the only times I've had like full skin meltdowns with the glueless ones have been when I let a little bit of moisture get in there, and then it's really, really cold, and then they do not work. Like they come right off the bottom of the ski. The Contour Generation 3 one is pretty darn nice. If you baby it, keep the ski base really dry when you're about to put it on, and you've kept it in your jacket. I've had really, really good luck with those. I actually don't have a set of the Generation 3 ones yet, but I'm buddies with the owner on Facebook, so maybe I'll go begging with him. But it's called a Contour skin. They're made in Austria. I've had very good luck with those. So that's a great option as well. And then they're a little more versatile if you do happen to blow it and drop them in the pine needles or something. So.
Okay, we have a few questions about backpacks. So Stephen is asking, what size of pack would you say is big enough?
Yeah, I would say that orange one in the photos that I was skiing with, that thing is about 37 liters, 35 to 40 liters. And that allows me, that's probably a little bit big for most people, but that allows me to get in a med kit, a repair kit, a rescue sled, a big puffy jacket, food, water, and other stuff, whatever that means. If it's a big POW day, I might have 2 or 3 pair of goggles with me, something like that. So that's 35-ish liters. That's probably a pretty good size. In Europe, you'll see guys skiing with quite a bit smaller packs because often we're using the lifts or a tram there. I don't know any Euros that carry a rescue sled, but in North America, where we have much less helicopter rescue access, I just feel like I should, as a mountain guide, I should have like a means of moving an injured person at least below tree line or to a snow cave or back to the hut or to a landing zone or something like that. So maybe my pack's a little bigger, but I wouldn't go much below 30 liters because a good puffy jacket, like I have a giant, 7,000 meter jacket that Rab makes that on a really cold day, I'll bring that thing and like fully stuffed. The thing's probably like that. And that's pretty, if I'm really packing it in there. If it's wet, like in the Cascades or up in British Columbia and it's near 0C, I have a synthetic Rab puffy that I'll put in there. So that's even bulkier. So I would say minimum 30 liters. I wouldn't go above 40 unless you foresee camping out where you're going to have like a sleep system with you and a stove and things like that. But that 35 liter, like Ortovox makes a good one. Who else? Arc'teryx makes really durable, nice ones. They're a little bit heavier and spendy. Something like that. That'll probably serve you pretty well.
Okay, David is a professional photographer, and he wants to bring his camera along on his climbs. So do you know what he can do to reduce the weight in his bag? Do you know any backpacks to help this? Some lightweight backpacks, maybe.
I have seen some folks. I'm gonna confess ignorance here. I'm just shooting with an iPhone 12. That's about all I can muster. There are some sports-specific photography backpacks I've seen photographers using. What my buddies, some of those really nice photos in there were from Matt Kennedy and Mating Patelis, who are both professional photographers. What Mating and Matt often do is they'll have their normal touring pack, and then they have one of those chest-mounted things that their SLR goes into right there. And that just seems like it's right there, and then it's quick to come out, but it's also pretty well protected. That's what I've seen them doing most of the time. You know, if you're really trying to save weight, what a lot of people will do is just get the simplest backpack possible, which is just basically a sleeve. So it doesn't have extra pocket zippers, all this kind of stuff. And then you can put the shovel and probe on the inside, and your puffy jacket can go there. It just takes a little more strategy when you're packing it. And that's about the lightest option you're going to have. I still use the tools kit because I'm often digging and I don't want to put a wet shovel or an icy shovel back in the pack with my puffy jacket and all this kind of stuff. But there are options out there. So start looking around. If you want, email me. You could probably hit up some photographers on Instagram like Matthias Fredrickson, a couple other folks like that, and Seb Montaz, and just ask them, hey, what do you put in your photographic equipment in? And you're a pro photographer as well. They'll probably answer you if they're reading their Instagram messages or whatever. So that's as good as I can do. Sorry, it's not better.
Thanks, Rob. So off to boot question. So how should the boot fit? A bit loose, a bit tight? Do you wear socks?
Yeah, this is a great question. In general, I would say in a perfect world, so you've got all the time and cash you want, I would say pull out the liner from whatever backcountry boot you get and replace it with an Intuition liner, and have a professional boot fitter fit it to your foot. Okay. Part of that is going to start out with whatever boot you have. I have a really high arch, low volume foot, so I can wear a Dynafit TLT boot really happily. That boot itself is already a little bit tight over the instep for some people. So if you're trying to get into a boot that's already a bit tight on you, that may invite problems. Like, I love the fit of that thing. I barely need to buckle it. But so make sure you're buying, Scarpas often have a higher volume fit. So if you got a big wide foot, they fit people a little bit better. For me, I end up packing out the liner and they have to start adding foam around it, and it's just doesn't work. So try to start with a boot that's suited to your foot. Then once you fit it, a good boot fitter, when she or he fits it to your foot, is probably going to put little spacers between your toes and maybe even a double sock just over the toes. So you want that to have a nice snug fit around your heel so it doesn't come up when you're touring, and around your foot, but the toes are going to be a little more spacious. You're going to want to be able to move your toes. This is not like the Alpine ski racers who crank those things down and you can't even move your foot in there and it's going to sleep. So you want a little bit of extra space in the toes that you can wiggle. So the boot fitter will put spacing in between your toes when they mold it. Then when you go to use it, you don't use those things, obviously, and they've just built in an extra couple millimeters of play around your foot. But when you're skiing, it should lock down really nicely so you have good control of the ski. And when you go uphill, you're going to loosen your buckles. You don't want your heel rising inside the liner because you get phenomenal blisters if you go out touring. So it does take a little bit of voodoo. And if you get a boot fit and you go out skiing a couple of days and it's not feeling right, go back to the boot fitter and ask him or her to fix it, because that's what their job is, and you paid for it. So hopefully that'll help you out.
Okay, we have a question from Jim. So he'd like to go all in on avalanche training gear. So he hears that Dynafit has an intro package. Do you recommend the tech binding if there is no resort backcountry crossover?
Yeah. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, and hit me in the chat if I start rambling about something irrelevant. Yeah, if you can do like a Dynafit intro package, it probably comes with that Dynafit turn binding. I think they call it the turn, right? It's the heavier binding, and it adds under the toe a plate where that whole toe will rotate a little bit. That thing is probably the safest for your knees, but it's still really light. It tours really efficiently. Um, and depending on what binding and all that kind of stuff, the Dynafit stuff is great. They were the first ones to do the tech binding. A guy named Fritz Bartel invented that thing more than 30 years ago now. And they've really refined it. They make a bunch of different bindings. I would just get a middle of the road one, not too light at first. And that'll be a great binding for you, most likely. The skins they use are Pomokas. Those are great skins. Their skis are made by Fisher. Those are great skis. So if you can get a good Dynafit package, that'll be awesome. I don't really own like a dedicated Alpine setup anymore. Yeah, if I had the cash, I'd probably blow a couple grand on like a carving setup and go try to get rad. But I just ski, mostly if I go to the resort, it's either a firm day and I'm just working on ski skills, or if I go to the resort by choice, it'll be a soft day and I just ski my tech bindings anyway, and it's not a big deal. So, I didn't grow up ski racing, so I don't have that sense of like, oh, this stuff is so like lightweight and flimsy compared to somebody who's a charger. So hopefully that helps out.
Thanks, Rob. So we actually went a little bit overboard, but we have 16 more questions. So if you're okay, I will just like go through all of them and answer.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, Helga is asking, any thoughts about avalanche backpacks?
Yes, great question, Helga. They're very effective in most terrain. Where the avalanche backpacks, for people who don't know, these are the backpacks that have a bladder right behind your neck back in here. It's 150 liters or so, and there's compressed air in there or a fan, and you deploy the thing and it gets bigger, and that tends to keep your body on top of the snow in an avalanche. Okay. They're very effective as long as you're not in the trees, and as long as you're not at the bottom of the avalanche path when it occurs, or above, like obviously a cliff or a crevasse, something like that. But in general, they seem to improve your chances of survival quite a bit. Some of the manufacturers will say, oh, they improve it by 100% or 50% or whatever. But it really depends on where you get avalanched. Like if you get avalanched and pushed off a cliff, it's not going to do anything for you. Or if you're right above a crevasse, you get pushed into a crevasse and buried, it's not going to do anything for you. But on a big open slope, they look like they're much more effective. Like, they'll do these tests where they have a dummy on the slope. They trigger an avalanche and then deploy the airbag, and they watch the dummy get taken for a ride. As long as the dummy doesn't hit a tree, go into a hole or off a cliff, more than 90% of the time the dummy comes out on top, or at least with part of the bag exposed. So really, there's almost no search time at that point as well. So if you're going to be backcountry skiing a lot, I would invest in one. I have one. Now they're like these electrical systems or whatever. If you foresee flying with it, in Europe, the Euros do not mind flying with a compressed gas cylinder, as long as you announce it, I think. So you just call ahead and you say, hey, I'm flying with this thing. They make a note on your ticket, and it's fine. In the United States, though, you cannot travel with compressed gas cylinder, either in checked luggage or on board. So that means you're now doing one of these battery packs. Okay, so Scott and Black Diamond Peeps and Arc'teryx all make these fan packs that run off of battery power. Right now, they're still quite a bit heavier than the pack I have, but they're great for traveling if you're in the States. But I would say for anybody who's going to backcountry ski a lot, an airbag is a good idea.
Okay, George is asking, how are avalanches different in the tree versus above the tree line?
Yeah, great question, George. So you remember at Sunrise Lodge, we had all that great below tree line skiing. Yeah, you do not want to get avalanched, period, first and foremost, but you definitely do not want to get avalanched with these terrain traps around. So cliffs, trees, tons of rocks, crevasses, things like that. If you were going to get avalanched, the way you'd want to get avalanched would be on like a big open slope with a nice gradual run out, no trees. Okay. Because then you got a chance of just taking the ride and getting spit out the end, and you're okay. Okay. Now we're not hoping for that, but as soon as there's trees or rocks around, if it's a bigger avalanche, you're going to get going 50, 60 miles an hour, 100 Ks an hour. So the first tree you hit is going to break your back, your neck, or snap your legs. I mean, you just cannot risk it. And in terms of trees anchoring the slope, this is a common misconception. Really, the trees need to be starting to be so tight that the skiing is unpleasant for those trees to be anchoring the slope. So if you're making big turns between old growth trees like we do up in Canada, those trees are not anchoring the slope. If anything, they're actually weak spots within a slab if there is a slab. So you just want to be really careful and conservative. As soon as you're skiing around terrain traps, man, you just cannot risk it in avalanche, because even a relatively small avalanche, if you wrap yourself around your tree, you can get really messed up. So anyway.
We have one also great question that's very related to the last question. What is the difference in courses? So Jax took an avalanche level 1 course and looking at 2, but the companion rescue course. So maybe we could just like give a little bit overview of the courses here.
Yeah.
As well.
So first off, Jax, I've done a webinar in 57 hours. You can find it on their channel, on their page, about the level 2. I teach Area 2s up in Canada. We'd go to a hut, bring in our chef, fly in, then we have the whole place to ourselves. It's awesome. It's full this year, but 2023, I'm doing another one. And if you're local, it sounds like you did a level 1 down at Crystal. Let's try to connect here, shoot me an email, and we'll chat. But the companion rescue is a single day, 8 hours, just focused on beacon, shovel, probe, and team rescuing. So obviously we're going to go skiing most of the time with, I kind of prefer a group of 4. More than that, it starts to get unwieldy. Less than that, I feel like I want more people digging. God forbid we had an accident, right? So the companion rescue does 8 hours of that. We dive into beacon searching, things like that. We try to really get those fundamental skills and then put them together in a way that you're going to team rescue with your buddies, right? So allocating resources, how to divide up resources, and how to team dig, because the digging is really what takes up all the time in a rescue. It's a great course. One day, people are teaching them for a couple $100, it seems like. I'm doing a couple of them in December. One of them, I think on the 19th, through Cough Adventures. Anyway, we can connect. The level 2 is also, the level 1's a 24-hour course. The level 2's a 24-hour course. And the ones I do in Canada, we stretch it out over 6 days. It's kind of a deep dive thing. But in general, the level 2 is not about necessarily taking more risk or going bigger or any of that kind of stuff. It takes the level 1 skills, builds on those, and we try to get a better process going in terms of incorporating the information from the avalanche bulletin, if you have one, and being as much a facilitator as just a contributing member of the group. So you want to really have that process dialed, know what questions to ask in which circumstances, and have this daily process we do a little more fluid, right? And so the level 2 will start to deal with some things like building a run atlas, photos, maps, imagery of where we're skiing. It'll also deal with, ideally, dealing a little more on point with what avalanche problems and what snowpack tests and observations and mitigation strategies we might use to address those avalanche problems. So we're going to treat a wind slab avalanche problem way differently than we might treat a cornice fall or a storm slab problem, things like that. And so we can talk about in the level 2, which snowpack test might you use to investigate a wind slab problem, a storm slab, deep persistent slab, things like that. And then how to integrate all these observations we're making, not just snowpack tests, but what are we seeing in the field? What's the avalanche bulletin telling us? What are other people telling us? How do we take all of that information and then decide what is appropriate ski terrain on the day and what is inappropriate ski training on the day? So that really becomes that level 2 skill. And then we also talk a little bit about how do you just go to a new place that might not have an avalanche bulletin or you've never skied, and how do we get into that snowpack, get some fun skiing done, but start gathering information and make smart choices like that. So.
Okay, thanks, Rob. We have a question from Ignacio, and I'm just going to read the whole question. So on a long backcountry trips, so multi-day trips, do you usually carry one heavy bag with all the stuff, food, tent, etc.? And do you recommend to bring another small bag like the one you showed on your presentation for doing daily skiing? I mean, when you leave the base camp to go and explore around.
Yeah, so that would be a decent strategy if you're going to base camp somewhere. So Nirvana Pass up in Canada, there's no hut or anything there right now. So people will fly in. Now they use the helicopter, but if you were skiing in there, you might have like a big giant pack, 70 liters, something like that. And just survive the ski in, put up your shelter, put up your cook tent, get comfy, all that. And then maybe in there you have a small, a 28 liter super light pack as you can get away with. It's a great strategy. So if you got the cash for 2 backpacks and things like that, I would be thinking along those lines too, because nobody wants to ski with a 70 liter pack. So.
Okay, next question. What kit would you carry in your repair kit?
Great question. I try to have mine in a little like bag about that big. And I try to take stuff that's going to be as versatile as possible. So a couple of those ski straps or voile straps, people will call them, a couple of those longer, so you could like lash a boot to a ski or go around the whole cuff of your boot, something like that. I'll definitely have a little set of the smallest Leatherman I can carry with like decent pliers. So that way you could like, twist baling wire on a crampon or bend something or try to open something or whatever. A small knife. And I will then look at what binding system I have, or maybe if I have somebody asked about that atomic flex, if I'm going on a trip with somebody with that binding, I may go to the ski shop and say, hey, does that binding have like some little parts that would be impossible to improvise in the field? And if they do, I'll try to buy a couple of those little things, whether that's screws or a little clip or clamp or whatever it is. So my kit usually has stuff to repair tech bindings, right? So that's more screws for the top sheet, some steel wool to like put in a hole if you rip the binding out of the top sheet, and some super glue to like glue some wood and steel wool down in the ski, and then I can maybe screw into that or repair it that way. Some people swear by 2-part marine epoxy because it tends to cure at a lower temperature with more humidity. That can be a great option if you're trying to repair a binding overnight or something. What else do I have in there? Bit of skin wax, baling wire, a spare skin tip, a spare pole basket can be really nice. If you have to pull out of a hut several kilometers and somebody has just a plain pole, it's just going to sink every time. But that's about it. I try to customize it based on what I have. If I'm tent camping, then I'll definitely have enough stuff to fix a tent pole. What else? Other stuff in there, like if I'm going up on a glacier and the weather might be bad, I'll definitely have a battery brick, an extra battery for my phone, because losing your phone on the glacier would be a bummer. And then you're down to a paper map and a compass. The reality is not very many people under the age of 35 are using paper map and compass anymore. And if I'm honest with myself, I used to be really dialed with one, but I'm using the phone so much now. I've got to admit my skills are probably rustier than they should be. So I'll bring a backup brick for my phone, something like that. So that's kind of it. Med kit, it's standard stuff. Like maybe I'm carrying one of those like fancy tourniquets in case you have a really wicked bleed. That's more of a climbing situation sometimes. But I'll carry the tourniquet and a basic wound management, maybe some painkiller stuff if we're going to be backcountry or whatever, but that's about it.
Great, thanks. We actually had pretty much the same question on YouTube as well. Like, what situations? How does your kit? What do you carry in your pack for emergencies and repairs, and how did that change based on elect participants' destination? But you actually covered that now as well.
So the only other emergency stuff I might have in there is a rescue sled, and it's a pain in the butt. Mine's about a pound. It packs down about that big, but I can put a person in there. I have in the back of my backpack, I take the foam out and I put in a thermarest. So I can put a thermarest in the sled, put a person in there. Hopefully they're not too badly injured, and then tow that sled with a bit of 10 meters of cord or something like that. It's a hassle, but think about on a really bad day, if you're above tree line, a person got hurt, you can't just sit down, like they're going to die. So you got to be able to move them somewhere. So you should probably think about the rescue sled as well. Anyway.
Okay, thanks. So we have a question from Megan. So she's from Colorado and she's new to backcountry skiing. She dabbled for 1 season. She also has friends that want to go, but they're also very inexperienced. So she actually is asking how to get into the areas with no avalanche terrain. how can she get comfort that the area she's hiking in is not in avalanche terrain?
Great. Yeah, great question. That's exactly the way to be thinking. Where are you living in Colorado? I'm curious. You can put it in the chat and I'll look at it. Okay, so a good level 1 avalanche course is going to give you a ton of information on how to identify avalanche terrain from a map, from a guidebook, things like that. If you want to dive into it, there is a digital mapping resource called CalTopo, like caltopo.com. Get on there and there's a slope shading tool. And if you can identify where you're thinking of going skiing, so like there's tons of low angle skiing on Vail Pass up by Univa. And these are not like stashes or secrets. I think everybody knows them by now. There's tons of low angle touring to be done at certain spots on Bertha Pass. Hidden Valley in Rocky Mountain National Park has some lower angle areas, things like that. And but if you get some guidebooks as well, like if you buy Fritz Sperry's guidebooks, he has great guidebooks that'll show you really nice places to go that are low avalanche exposure. And he talks about in there what's more and less, avalanche prone, like that. But I would say start with CalTopo and figure out the slope shading tool in there. It's very easy to do. Just Google slope angle shading CalTopo. You'll get like online tutorials, and then look at some guidebooks. And Fritz Sperry has got several guidebooks for up around the I-70 corridor, and he's got some best of things and whatever. So there's tons of resources out there. You can find them. So look around, and if you're striking out, just email me and I'll help you out.
Great, thanks. Rodrigo is asking, what are the good ski resorts in USA to go for backcountry skiing?
So you guys see in the background, my wife is in here trying to be quiet, getting her a bag out of there. So she's trying to be quiet, which in the end just looks weirder because now there's a person lurking. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, sorry.
Hi, Rebecca.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I didn't even hear the question, Maya. Which one were we on?
If you can recommend some ski resorts for backcountry skiing in USA.
Yeah. So different ski resorts have different backcountry policies. So some of the areas don't have backcountry gates at all. They tell you cannot leave the area once you're in there, whatever. Others like, if you're in Europe, you can kind of go wherever you want. You're on your own. So you can ski out of bounds, you can ski inbounds, you can do whatever. In North America, though, you're gonna have to check. Like Revelstoke has phenomenal gates that access like huge terrain, really cool. So, and same with Jackson, Park City, some of these places. So you gotta be careful, because as soon as you're outside the gate, you're in the backcountry. Just because you can see the ski patrol shack does not mean anybody's coming to get you, right? So don't fool yourself into thinking it's like totally safe out there. You really got to pay attention to what the avalanche hazard is, what kind of problems you're dealing with, things like that. But some of the Utah resorts have great adjacent backcountry right there. I know Park City has had a controversy with one of their gates being open. Vail has some great backcountry right out the gates. God, I barely ski their resorts anymore. I don't know the resorts out here in the Northwest because I just moved here, and B, I've never skied at them. So it's just going to depend. You can just Google like backcountry gates and wherever you're going to go, like Winter Park or, Telluride, stuff like that. Telluride's got phenomenal backcountry right there. And then you can start to see some options. So.
Great. George is asking if it is a good idea to ski alone. So he will be ski touring a lot of the time alone. So if that's a bad idea, or if he just needs to be more careful.
Ski touring alone, I do it occasionally. It's not, I wouldn't say never do it, something like that. But if you're going to go alone, you need to understand that even a minor injury or gear mishap can turn very serious very quickly. So I would say make sure someone knows where you are. Make sure you have a satellite communication device. Okay, that InReach, the little mini, is now $300. Pairs with your phone, totally great. If I'm skiing backcountry alone, my rule is just no avalanche exposure whatsoever. So no, just like Megan was asking about, I just don't ski in avalanche terrain alone, period. So I would just say dial it back a little bit, be a little more conservative, but I go backcountry skiing alone, a few times a year or something, often just for fitness. something like that. So anyway.
Great advice. Thanks, Rob. So what are your go-to food drink choices when touring?
Good questions. I tend to sweat a lot. I tend to be overheated all the time. So I'm a big fan of this brand out of Boulder, Colorado called Scratch with a K, Scratch Labs. And they make a product called a hyperhydration thing, which is really got a ton of salt in it. And I will slam one of those before at the trailhead or maybe an hour into skiing. That kind of extra hydrates me. I do that. But in general, I try to eat just real food. If I'm going out for a long day, so like I'll bring an actual sandwich, something like that. I try to avoid like the super sugary goos and drinks and things like that. Just because if I start on that stuff, then I tend to want it more and more and more. And there's a lot of really, if you're really into it, training and nutrition and stuff like that, I would read the book Scott Johnston has out with Steve House called Training for the New Alpinism, or Training for the Uphill Athlete is the newer one with Killian Jornet. And that talks a ton about things you can do to like increase your body's ability to be out burning fat during the day. I don't want to go into it because it's just a total rabbit hole and it'll put most people to sleep. But anyway, email me if you want some more stuff. I tend to do real food and water. That's totally fine. But don't just drink water if you're not going to have real food, because you want to have a hydration drink or something. So if I'm eating real food, I can get away with water or whatever. But if I'm going to go a little lighter, I might take an energy drink or something like that, and then supplement it with some stuff. Anyway.
Okay, next question. So Jeff is asking, is the touring schedule and or method different for backcountry skis versus Alpine?
Great question. Your backcountry skis compared to your Alpine skis are going to get trashed. So I'm just going to say that up front. If you live in a low snow zone like Colorado, or at times Montana, Wyoming, things like that, sometimes Salt Lake, you're just going to hit rocks. That's the way it is. And you're going to damage the base and do all this kind of stuff. Try to be careful. I typically don't really start backcountry skiing until after Christmas time, just because I don't want to break myself or my skis or whatever. I would say the other thing, the glue on the skins pulls the wax out of the base of your skis. So gone are the days of this perfect tune that your Alpine skis might have. But I'll just do, some general yellow or red wax over the summer, scrape that, put on some general all temperature wax or something in the fall, and do it a couple times during the year. I try to deburr my edges occasionally, but your edges get dinged up because you'll scratch around on rocks. And if you're really into ski mountaineering, getting rad, stuff like that, then you're often side slipping down into a couloir, stepping over rocks, things like that. And you beat up your skis. So just take as good a care of them as you can. But you can't be putting them through a stone grinder all that frequently, because one of the ways they make the skis lighter is the bases and the edges aren't nearly as robust as like a burly Alpine ski. So there you go. There's a bunch of info online too. You can Google it and start dorking out. I try to do a good job of it, but whatever. They're backcountry skis.
Okay, thanks, Rob. So Joseph is asking helmets and recommendation.
Yeah, great idea. I ski with a helmet probably, I don't know, 50% of the time. If I'm going to be in the trees all day, I'll often have a helmet on. If I'm going ski mountaineering where I'm booting couloirs, or I might be, climbing a little bit, I'll have a helmet on. If it's a really nice POW day and I'm just skiing open bowls and stuff, I might not have a helmet on, if I'm honest. The thing about them is you want to have it lightweight. Camp makes a really nice lightweight ski mountaineering helmet. Some people will wear just a climbing helmet. Then the vents will sometimes get full of snow or whatever. The really full featured helmets that that like Smith makes and companies like that, they are, to me, a little too bulky, a little too heavy to have in the pack or on the pack. What's that other one? It's European, it's Swedish, called I'm totally blanking on it. They make a really svelte one that's certified for climbing and skiing. Oh, I can't remember it right now. Email me, I'll tell you. Sweet Protection. That's what it's called. Sweet, as in candy. Sweet Protection. They make a really nice looking touring one. So I would just get one that's a little lighter, a little more svelte. And some of them, like the camp one, you can put some earmuffs on it and close up the vents and whatever. It's pretty cool. So.
Okay, and Rodrigo is actually just following up on his previous question. What are the good ski resorts for backcountry skiing for beginners?
You know, you can go to a place like Alta, Snowbird, Vail, Park City, Crystal, Alpental, that have a little bit, Crested Butte, that have a little bit rowdier terrain, Bridger Bowl. And on a POW day there, it's as close to skiing in the backcountry as you're going to get, but you also have the patrol working for you and controlling the slopes. So any of those places that I mentioned are going to be really good for skiing, you know, starting backcountry skiing. It's not really backcountry, but you're inbounds. On a huge POW day inbounds, I've started carrying a really light carbon probe, a shovel, and a really light beacon, just to, you know, just to, in case like the patrol makes a mistake and I get buried or a friend gets buried or something like that. So that'd be a great way to do this. Try to go, you know, if you're in Canada, I don't know where you are, Rodrigo, but like Revelstoke, Whistler, you know, and then you stay inbounds, but you can get some pretty nice POW turns on a soft day. And then once you do a level one, get a little more comfortable, you can start tackling some simpler backcountry terrain out of the piste. And then Maya, I'm seeing the last question here from Natalie, looking for a guide, and none in Italy. I wish I was still there, Natalie. My dad's Italian. I love going to Italy, but we moved from Chamonix. So email me and I'll connect you with a guide. It depends where you are. I don't know if you can post in here right now where you're looking for, because like I know there's a great guide in Cortina named Alberto Di Giuli, speaks English perfectly. Born and raised in Cortina, great guy. And I think he's had.
We have him also on the website. So we actually started to work with one guiding service in Italy recently. So we still don't have the listing on the website, but we will have. And we actually are doing with, just a second. We're doing a webinar on ski safari in the Dolomites in February. So it's going to be really another amazing webinar. So feel free to just follow us on social networks, stay on 57 Hours website, and you won't miss our next webinars. We have really great stuff also in the plan. Cool. So I think that wraps everything up. We answered all of the questions.
Perfect. Great. Okay. Everybody, thanks for coming. Like Maya said, keep in touch and follow 57 Hours on social. And then you got to connect with Alberto Di Giuli in Cortina. He's a great guide. And then we'll have more webinars in the winter and all that kind of stuff. So thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It's great to see that almost 50 of you stayed until the end. So thank you all again for joining. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for the recording and to follow our other webinars. All the recordings are also there. So that's it. Thank you very much and have a great rest of your day. Talk soon, Rob. Bye.